So good evening, everyone. I'm Hector Gunther, Chair of the Comprehensive Financial Advisory Committee to the Town of Barnstable. This is the Monday, May 12th meeting of CFAC, so-called. We're happy that you're all here. I see we have a couple of members from the public listening in. Jeremy, can you call the roll, please?
Of course. Jim Sproul,
Present.
Chris King,
Yes, here.
Lillian Wu,
Here.
Hector Gunther,
I'm here.
Tom Keene,
Here.
and I am here.
Great. So we have a quorum. Awesome. Let's start off with seeing if there's any public comment from either of the public attendees. If not, welcome, and we're happy to have you join in later if you have some thoughts about what goes on. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of April 28th, please?
So moved.
Second.
Great. Does anyone have any comments on the minutes?
I think Chris Lazan's name has a typo in it. That's all.
Okay.
I had
Where's
one comment on page 3. At the top, it's the second bullet, 6 projects were withdrawn. And the first project that was mentioned was airport hard stance. And I'm not sure what that means.
I think that's a typo. Mark, what was that a reference to?
They're hard stands. They're reinforced pads that go on the
Okay.
apron where they park their aircraft. Yep.
Yeah, that's fine. I just
Okay.
didn't know what it
Yeah,
was. A typo.
I
Okay.
picked that one up too.
Okay.
So Teresa can fix that hard stand. Where is the typo for Chris Lauzon,
It's
Tom,
um
or Jim?
it was just his name. So let me bring it. I think in the roll call. Let me see.
UZON.
Yeah, it looks like it's spelled okay.
On page 2, the roll call, I have CHIRS. Maybe that was changed.
Oh. All right. Page 2, Teresa, third line at the end, Chris, CHIRS should be Chris L. Any other comments? I thought the minutes looked good and captured the meeting very well.
Agreed.
If there are no other comments, Jeremy, would you call the roll, please?
Of course. Jim Sproul,
Yes.
Chris King,
Yes.
Lillian Wu,
Yes.
Hector Gunther,
Yes.
Tom Keene,
Yes.
and I am a yes.
Great. And I see that Councilor Betty Lutke has joined us as well. Welcome, Betty. So on to section 4A. Can we have an update on how things are going with the operating budget subcommittee, please?
Okay, I'll jump in and let you know that we are almost finished. We're putting the finishing touches on it in the next couple of meetings, so we should be able to bring it to the full CFAC by the end of May. And I'll let the other members of the committee jump in and add anything they want.
So that would be the meeting of May 26th.
Yeah, we should be finished. We should be able to send it to you before then so that the full committee can review it, and then we can, I believe the meeting is on the 27th.
Okay.
Memorial Day is a holiday.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. That's super. And I'm curious to know how long is it going to be roughly?
Oh,
How many
about
pages?
100 pages.
Sorry?
It's about 200 pages.
Okay.
No, we want it to be totally thorough.
Yeah, well, that's good. I
Yeah,
would
yeah,
expect nothing less from
that's correct.
Lillian and company. But in
Rather
reality,
than using numerals, we've decided to spell out every number.
well, I'm glad you made that executive decision as a subcommittee.
Oh, no,
Great.
it's a unanimous decision.
Uh, All right. So we'll look for it to be circulated the prior week and we'll review it and presumably vote on it on the 27th of May. That's great. Thank you so much.
Hector, we're
Thank
trying to
you.
get it down to one page, but it's really small point size on the font.
Well, Tom, when when you want to condense things, they've got the person, Tom
It's-
Keene, to
Tom, it's
to-
just that the school report takes over 60% of that first page.
I
Yeah,
know.
that's
I figure
correct.
I figure the school report needs to be at 60% of the dollars. It should be 60% in the space.
all right. Have there been any um, controversial portions of the report? Anything notable and quotable?
I think it would make sense just to wait until we're all finished.
All right.
rather
Good.
than
All
than a
right.
preview.
Okay, Chris King has described our draft as fabulous. So we don't have any controversies per se,
Okay.
but it's very good.
Excellent.
It's an excellent report.
Good. Good. All right. Well, we all look forward to seeing it.
It's good to have the
Uh,
18 on it. That's good. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Tom, I know Lillian has given me inputs on the fixed cost portion. You've read it and you're good with it, or I was kind of expecting some edits from your side.
Did you send around another version?
I'll send it again to you. Yes, I
Please
did.
do. Yeah, I didn't see it.
All right, I'll resend it to you.
Okay.
I didn't want to miss any edits from you because your edits are
Happy to. Yep.
are well received.
Excellent. And remind me, so if we approve this on the 27th, it goes to town council, presumably. And Mark, I'm looking to you for help on timing. It goes to town council that week. And
Yeah,
when would the
you approve it on
subcommittee
the
present?
27th, we'll send it out first thing in the morning on the 28th.
Right. And when would the committee present to town council?
So June 5th is the budget hearings are scheduled to begin
Yeah.
at that meeting. So we can get you on the agenda for at the beginning of the public hearings. on that.
Excellent.
And
Excellent.
I'll be there as well. So yeah, I'll be presenting most of the operating budget and be happy to join the group in your presentation.
Right. So Mark, I had a question. So on the town council, the May 15th town council agenda, there's a line item where Mark Milne is presenting fiscal year 2026 operating budget. How does that differ from what you're going to present at the subsequent meeting?
Yeah, at the subsequent meeting, Hector, I'll be presenting all the individual appropriations as they come up at the start of the public hearings. This Thursday night is just a high-level overview of the operating
Uh-huh.
budget. And
Okay.
once I have that presentation ready, I'll share it with this committee.
Excellent. Are you going to be there in person, Mark, or by
It will
Zoom?
be, yes.
Excellent.
I'm
Excellent.
trying to be there in person. Yes, I am.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I'll mark my calendar. I'd like to come and hear your presentation in person. So excellent.
I won't be there this Thursday in person, no, but
Oh, this Thursday, not this.
the public hearings, June 5th, yes.
Okay, great. All right, good. Thank you. Any other comments? Any questions about the subcommittee's work? All right.
Question, Hector.
Yeah, go ahead, Betty.
I'm just having a few concerns based on some stuff swirling around on social media. One of them has, and also, backed up by talking to people personally. One has to do with the operating budget for the DPW. And I don't know if the subcommittee or anything in the past has done looked at what the CWMP is doing to the operating budget of the DPW. Is there any historical data to show that the CWMP, the decision to do this in-house, is degrading some of the other services of DPW? Is there too much attention on those resources in the operating budget going towards supporting the CWMP and neglecting other areas? So that's just a question. I don't know if that's been looked at or at all, or if whoever's doing the DPW has seen any of that. You probably haven't done the historical, what was it like before the CWMP? And then the other one is, not related to that, and I think, Hector, you've seen it, it's swirling around in a couple of areas having to do with pilot payment in lieu of taxes. There was a study, I guess, through the CFAC in 2007 that identified, and Mark Mill's probably the only one in this Zoom session with enough historical knowledge to know this. It was done in 2007 that identified, and I can't say the number, but quite a few nonprofits in Barnstable with nobody paying pilot. And then I don't know that anything has been done with that. But is that something that the CFAC should look at? Is that something we look at as we move forward? Again, all this goes back to the CWMP taking the preponderance of our resources, both in CIP and in the operating budget for the next 30 years or so. So I just throw those out there, those two things.
Yeah, so maybe I'll take on the second point that you made, Betty, and then maybe defer to Mark on the first one. So the pilot study done in 2007 by CFAC, John Schoenherr was the chair. That's the only study that I'm aware of where CFAC has gotten involved in the issue of looking at payments in lieu of taxes. That is certainly something that we could consider if the town council, directed us to look at it. But to my knowledge, it hasn't been looked at except since 2007 or 18 years ago. Mark, maybe you want to add to that and then tackle Betty's first question.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, so 2007 was actually an ad hoc committee that a former town council assigned the responsibility of looking at payment in lieu of taxes to see what the feasibility of it was. And I believe the conclusion of that committee wasn't CFAC, but I think there were a couple of members of CFAC on the committee. The conclusion was that the squeeze wasn't worth the juice, or the juice wasn't worth the squeeze. I mean, there wasn't too much effort would need to go into trying to negotiate pilot agreements, which are, by the way, voluntary. Can't force anybody to make payments under the pilot agreement, even if you entered into one. And so, that's simply, you see what, Boston has probably the most successful pilot program in the country. And even, I think the latest data I was looking at, their program, they collect about 36% of what they hope to collect under that program, because there's no mandatory requirement to make those payments. It's only if they can meet the obligation that they've agreed to financially. But since then, 2018, it was in 2018, CFAC, a former CFAC committee itself was assigned at looking at that report and updating that report. That was the one that was chaired by John Schoenherr, who was, yep, that was 2018.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So
that was the most recent one.
Right, and he issued a memo to town council, but I was mistaken. It was 2018, not 2007. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. Matter of fact, we had a counselor ask for an update on that today, most recently, and assessing division was able to produce, an updated list of all non-tax or tax exempt property in the town of Barnstable. And we provided that listing with all the assessed values, grouped by taxpayer name, to the counselor who inquired. So, but to your point, Hector, if it's something that the town council would like this group to look into, again, they can certainly, ask us formally to do so.
Great. And I do have another question. You mentioned Boston. Cambridge has a lot of Harvard properties on it. Does Cambridge collect pilot? And if so, how much? Do you know?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if Cambridge does, but yeah, certainly Harvard's one of Boston's as well. But Harvard campus shares, both towns, both cities.
Right.
So yeah, I maybe Cambridge does as well, because you look at the list of who is paying these pilots. It's institutions of higher education that are well endowed, health organizations, again, well endowed. So, the common formula, I think, that underlying successful pilot programs are organizations who have the financial means to make those payments. When you look at the list in Barnstable, the big one hanging out there is Cape Cod Hospital. But they provide, during that conversation with them back in 2007, they provide a lot of services to the community in other ways. And of course, the town of Barnstable and the fire districts are some of the biggest owners of tax exempt property. Commonwealth of Massachusetts, which provides us a small payment in lieu of taxes on our cherry sheet. And of course, there's a lot of churches and synagogues is on that list as well, and organizations like that. And so, not a lot of organizations that have deep pockets that I think could pay a lot of money into the town of Barnstable for in the form of payment in lieu of taxes. And then again, it's not mandatory. It's you can't enforce them to honor any payment agreement that you do enter into.
Interesting. All right. Well, why don't we, hold that topic in abeyance. Betty, thank you for raising it, and maybe we can discuss a prospective pilot effort in the future. But Mark, I take your point that for all the work that goes into negotiating such agreements, the outcome would not be a huge increase in revenue, in your opinion.
Probably not. Looking at the organizations, and trying to think about what their financial means are, they're not going to have a lot of additional funds laying around to make payments.
Right.
Yeah.
And
I don't think, Hector, I don't think I'm advocating it. I just seen a lot of activity. And Mark indicates some other counselor had asked for stuff. So I'm sure they're seeing the activity too.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get more informed about it.
Yeah.
I think too that there wouldn't be a lot to be gained. It would be an enormous because there's so many, and most of them are quite small, that it becomes not very valuable effort.
Councilor Lucky, would you like me to share those two reports? They're kind of dated, again, 2007 and 2018, but they may provide you some useful information.
That would be helpful, Mark.
Okay, will do.
That would be great. If you could send it to all of us, that would be super, Mark.
Okay.
And for the committee's benefit, there are many non-tax paying entities, but for the purposes of this exercise, you would, of course, exclude the governmental property owners and just focus on churches, hospitals, affordable housing providers, possibly veteran services, those categories. But a good chunk of the property of the properties owned that don't pay taxes are owned by governmental entities. So we'd have to exclude them from any effort. So,
and did you want me to talk about Councilor Lucky's question about DPW?
Yes, please. That would be the first question.
Yeah. So thank you. We've made continued investments in DPW's operating budget over the past few years, simultaneously as we've implemented the CWMP. So they have not been cut. Their budget continues to be increased, and additional funding is provided on an annual basis, including what's being proposed for fiscal year 26. And all the positions that have been created for the CW, for implementation of the CWMP program have been provided for from the resources, the new resources that we've dedicated towards that program. And we haven't cut DPW's regular operations and redirected those over to the CWMP. So yeah, I've seen some of those posts, and they're not accurate. We're not redirecting funds away from existing operations, highway, structures and grounds, engineering, over to CWMP. Where the new investments that we're making in CWMP are coming with a new dedicated revenue source to pay for it.
Okay, no, thank you. That's what I thought. It's important
You're
to
welcome.
know.
Yes.
But I've always thought that DPW's budget should be even higher than it is, their operating budget. I think
They think so too.
well, I agree with them. I always think it should be more, but
Yes.
that's the way.
And if we give DPW responsibility for the school buildings, it will definitely have to be higher.
Mhm.
That idea that the Sproul Committee ventured about combining having a combined facilities department for the schools and for the town buildings as well. So, and Betty, I don't know if there's any update on that matter. You were going to talk to council leadership about that?
I have talked to them about it, and there's no update on it.
No update. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. All right. Well, thank you for that question. Those questions, Betty. And so on to the next. Mark, I suggested that you tackle a couple of things, give the committee an update on the town's bond sale, which I think was last week. How did that go? Was it successful? And how was the price versus price talk? How was the issue price?
So yeah, there were about 9 projects I think we were ready to move forward with on providing the funding, the financing through a bond issue to implement those projects. And it was a total of about $3.5 million, or I mean $5.3 million, $5.4 million. We had eight bidders, I believe, respond, which is a pretty good bid list. And we typically get anywhere from 7 to 9.
Yeah, so it's 8 is typical.
Yeah, and so FHN Financial Capital Markets was the winning bidder at 3.65%, I think, 3.66%. And we were anticipating north of 4. Our Hilltop Securities, our financial advisors, 3 weeks before we went out to bid, were informed us that AAA rated agencies were seeing 20-year bond issues in north of 4%. So I think we did very well with the bond sale. A lot of competition, good interest rate, only about 10 basis points higher than the previous year, which was about 3.56. And so very competitive, happy with the results. Of course, we had S&P had to do a bond rating associated with the issue. They rated it AAA, along with all of the town's outstanding debt as well. Citing our financial performance, our budget flexibility, financial policy procedures embedded in our town code, our administrative code. A strong residential tax base, one of the strongest in the Commonwealth. So all positive factors from them, and I think positive bid results.
And it was a 20-year issue, and it was $5 million and change.
Yeah, about $5.5 million, and some of the loans will be amortized over a shorter period of time, but the longest loans in the portfolio are 20-year loans, and mostly for building improvements.
That's excellent. And the 5 million and change, it seems to me last year's issue was a little bit larger.
Yeah, it was larger. And next year in 2026, we're anticipating north of 20 million to issue. We have a lot of borrowing authorizations out there, and projects will be breaking ground soon, and we'll need to make all of those part of our next bond issue. We try to collectively pool, as many loans as possible for the projects that are going to move forward to the construction phase, so that we're only issuing bonds once a year. Because it's a costly endeavor and a timely endeavor going out to the market.
Yeah. And we've used Hilltop for a number of years, I believe.
Yeah, we have. Yes.
Yeah.
Ever since I've been here, we've been using them.
And that's a Boston-based firm?
Yes, they do have an office in Boston, but I believe their home office is in Texas.
Really?
Yep.
Oh.
We've worked with the Boston group.
Yeah.
Cindy McNerney has been our point of contact for a long time, and her team.
So
Other
with those
questions?
projects, those are guaranteed to start? In other words, we've talked in the past about projects being approved, funded, but then not started, then have to kick in another year. All these projects are guaranteed they're shovel ready and ready to move forward?
Yes, that's yeah, it's a great question. That's why they're included in this issue, because we're gonna need the resources to start paying the vendors as these projects
Okay,
are
all right.
breaking ground. We're gonna be making payments. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question. Mark, I don't know if this really makes sense or not, but I'm just thinking outside the boxes. The enterprise funds, Hector had asked what is the reserves from the enterprise funds, and we have, you had helped me with this with $38 million in reserves. Are any of those reserves, I know that each one of the different enterprises goes off and puts their reserves in investments. Is an investment at 3.65% good for a reserve to maybe put the money into Barnstable?
Yes. So all of our investments are centrally managed with the town treasurer. So we use the concept of pooled cash. We keep the value of each enterprise fund's cash separated on the general ledger. Of course, but the funds are all managed centrally by our treasurer, and we have a very diverse portfolio of investments, including things like T-bills and equities and corporate bonds and U.S. government bonds. So it's a diverse pool. We actually have some certificates of deposits that are paying us north of 4% right now.
Yeah.
So it's our investment income generation for the past couple of years, with the way the market has grown substantially.
Right.
Just from the increase in reserve levels that we have, the increase in interest rates that you can find out there. The downside, of course, is the cost of borrowing. Remember those
Right.
days where we were borrowing money at less than 2% for many of our general obligation bonds, and now we're approaching 4%. So that's the downside. But yeah, we've actively try to make sure that every dollar that's sitting in the treasury has some kind of return associated with it, without over consolidating things into one type of investment. And we also have to follow what's called a legal list. We're not allowed to get into real risky stuff, being municipal funds.
Okay.
No,
Yeah, I mean,
no
there's
single A junk bonds or anything like that.
No, none of that kind of stuff.
no, but there's fees that go on to acquire the bonds,
Mhm.
or some sort of percentage above what you earn or below what you earn for getting the bonds, I would assume. some sort of
Yes,
fee.
there's a lot of issuance cost.
Right.
You have Hilltop's expense. We have bond counsel who has to review everything, and they charge a fee, and we have printing costs. And we have Standard & Poor's rating. They charge us anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000 for the ratings report in their review of our financials. And so, the way it typically works is our bids, we force a premium so that they pay us more. They give us more money than what we're looking to borrow, and then we use that additional money to pay off all the borrowing costs. That's the way it works in the municipal field environment.
Yeah.
All issuers do it that way, and then that gets factored into the true interest cost of what you borrow for, all that borrowing cost, and that's factored into that 3.655% rate that we're paying over the life of these bonds.
Yeah, well, I mean, thank you. I didn't mean to get into the deep weeds on that, but enterprise funds generate a lot of cash, and and you're using it, so that's good. And
and it has to stay with the enterprise fund, and we invest it for them. We try to earn. You look at their actual investment income that they earn versus what we budget, and we're always exceeding it because we're earning more than what we use to balance the budget. So
right. No, it's good.
And
good.
and
Thank you,
Mark. Further to Chris's question, I would think the enterprise fund reserves that are invested mostly in shorter term instruments. There wouldn't be a lot of 10 or 20 or never mind 30-year bonds in that portfolio. It'd be T-bills and CDs. So maximum maturity, I would think, of a couple of years, 3 years, something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because remember, I mean, even our three primary goals in investing money for the town of Barnstable is number one is safety. And so no risky stuff. Number two, it's liquidity. That speaks to what you were just saying. I mean, we can't put money in 5-year bonds or bills because we have to maintain some liquidity. We have weekly pay or biweekly payroll and weekly vendor warrants to pay. And sometimes, depending upon the enterprise fund, the revenue that comes in is sporadic. It comes in at certain times of the year, like the golf. Summer's the big season for the golf and marinas and Sandy Neck, and they're kind of dead in the winter. There's no money coming in, so So our third priority, of course, is yield.
Yeah, but it wouldn't do to have, if you invest in long-term instruments and interest rates rose, you'd have principal risk. So
yes.
So you wouldn't want to get into that.
Well, thank you for the discussion.
Yeah,
thank you.
No,
Thank you, Mark.
it's interesting and something I think CFAC ought to be aware of. Any other questions on the bond sale? All right, and then next on the agenda, Mark, I think this should be helpful if every meeting you could just give us an update, whatever you're hearing about any impact from all the changes in Washington and whether any of that is about to trickle down or soon will trickle down to the state and municipalities in Massachusetts.
Yeah, it's a great subject. Of course, we're watching a lot of this with trepidation. It's concerning about what potentially could happen, but it changes daily. Woke up, was it this morning, and I heard China and United States are close to making a new trade deal, and the stock market's up. Stock market futures are up 1,000 points, and so
it's the concept of a trade deal. It's not a trade deal,
right? So it changes on a daily basis, and you don't know what to believe. So. But anyways, it's we're watching all of our federal programs that we have closely, and we're trying to keep updated with any. We're reaching out to agencies to see if they have any updated information for us. Under the air, we have several entitlements. First of all, several federal program entitlements that we participate in, as opposed to a competitive grant awards. We have several entitlement types of programs. One of the biggest ones being out at the airport under the Airport Improvement Program. And that's about $1 million a year, anywhere from $1 million to $1.3 million. And that helps with airport capital projects. And to date, we have not received any information from the Federal Aviation Administration that there will be cuts to the airport improvement program, entitlement program. They've told us everything is still on course as it has been. They no negative information to date on that program. The one entitlement program that we have been informed of for potential elimination of is the Community Development Block Program. That is under the Department of Housing, or was it HUD, Housing and Urban Development.
Right.
They have in their federal fiscal year 2026 proposed budget. Again, it's just proposed, and their fiscal year doesn't begin until September 1, I believe, October 1. They're proposing to completely eliminate the CDBG program nationwide. So we get about $315,000 a year under that entitlement program. And so we have the potential, if that budget goes forward as proposed, to lose that. In our school department, we have Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV funds, all federal programs, range in dollar value, Title I being one of the largest. That program, along with IDEA, which is individuals with disabilities and educational assistance. I believe it's a federally funded program that helps students with special needs. Both those programs, that one and Title I, are preserved for now. We haven't heard anything about reductions to those programs, but Title II and Title IV, smaller grants, in the neighborhood of, I think, 140,000 and 80,000 respectively. We are informed that they will likely be reduced, but we don't know by how much. But they're a couple of our smaller federal programs. Title III is about 115,000, I believe, and that program is being eliminated. That's specifically for English language learners. They have indicated that they will be eliminating that program. So that's in the school department. And then, of course, the school participates in a lot of competitive federal grants every year. They do very well in competing and in getting awarded those federal grants, but it's on a competitive basis. So, you know, we watch for those as the application times open up and we apply accordingly. But no, those are separate from the entitlement programs.
And those, if I can interject, those federal grants, are those administered, if you know, by the Department of Education, which supposedly is going to go away?
Well, they're pass-through funds. Yes, I think they are. They do ultimately originate at the Department of Education. They flow to the State Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. But yeah, if they eliminate the department, they could still keep the programs, but just place the programs under another department, which is what they'll likely do if they do go forward with eliminating the Department of Education at the federal. They'll put that.
Okay.
We'll put some of those school grant programs under another department.
Okay.
How
about
police?
Sorry, go ahead.
Under the police department, we get a burn grant. That's kind of like an entitlement program. It's about $20,000 a year. No indications of elimination of that program yet. And we do have an outstanding competitive grant that we were awarded for about $250,000 to hire 2 additional police officers, and they phase in. We have to absorb the cost of those 2 additional officers over a 3-year period. We've been receiving our reimbursements on that grant on a regular basis. No indication that they're not going to reimburse us under that program. So we fully expect to receive the $250,000 over the next 2.5-year period. And then the last one I can think of is the state revolving loan funds. This could impact us indirectly. Every year, state revolving loan funds nationwide, every state has them. They receive, capital funding from the Environmental Protection Agency. I want to say Massachusetts is about $60 million a year. And the revolving loan funds use those dollars to, for to capitalize their loan programs. And to date, we haven't heard anything about those programs being eliminated. But I'm sure state revolving loan fund officials will inform every city and town across the Commonwealth immediately if they hear any updates about potential reductions or eliminations of funding under that program.
And if let's say that some of those funds that trickle down to the states are cut, it would be for the fiscal year beginning, is it September 1 for the federal government?
October 1 to September 30th is their fiscal year.
October 1. So it would be later on in 2025, presumably, when we would hear about pending cuts, but it would be effective in the federal government's fiscal 26.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
but also, the programs can be cut mid-fiscal year too. So
Right.
yeah, we have to be aware of that as well. So
Yeah. Wow. And any other, so while we're on the subject of environmental funding, is there any other federal EPA funding that finds its way to Barnstable other than the revolving loan fund?
Yeah, competitive grant. Occasionally, we will, when opportunities arise that fit a capital project that we're trying to implement. If we see an opportunity, we'll certainly put in an application for a competitive grant. So
yeah,
we have received several grants from EPA on a competitive basis. But those, you have to, again, you got to compete for those every single year. So there's no entitlements there.
Okay. All right. Well, was very helpful. Anyone have any questions about what Mark just went over?
Mark, one question. What does the CBDG money get used for?
Yeah. So in the past, we've used it for things like small businesses to facade replacement programs, for example, small business loans, to help some of our local businesses with some of the improvements they want to make. We've used it for affordable housing projects. We've used it for handicapped accessibility projects, which is really what we were hoping to target a lot of our CDBG money for in the future, is to try, we have some accessibility issues around sidewalks and curbs and things of that nature in many areas, especially down within Hyannis area. And so, because that's where a lot of the traffic is, and we'd really, we were hoping to use some of those monies to help make those accessibility improvements. So that's just some examples of what we've used it for in the past.
Thank you.
Other questions? Mark, does it make any sense to separately talk about the state's Governor Healy's new budget and any rumblings of cuts or increases to Barnstable resulting from the budget that's now being debated on Beacon Hill?
Yeah, so overall, with the governor's budget proposal, there's very little net growth in state aid for the town of Barnstable. It's like $70,000. So you're talking 30 million to 30 million. It's not a growth there. The House came out with their version of the budget, a little bit better for Barnstable. Senate came out with their version recently, and still a little bit better for Barnstable, but nothing substantial. No significant change than what the governor was proposing. Both those budgets, not only do they include state aid, but they also include state assessments. And so when you net assessments against the revenue or the aid that we're receiving, the bottom line net state aid is not substantially different under any one of those three budget proposals.
Mhm.
And so, our budget that is being proposed for the FY 2026 includes that governor's proposal. Again, no significant change. So most of the, or all of the pretty much of the budget increase for fiscal year 26 it has to be provided for from property taxes and local receipts, including reserves, any reserves that the town has. And so that's where we're at. They'll conference. House and Senate are currently, I believe, in conference committee debating their two versions of the budget. So the way the process works is that they'll reconcile the two budgets to come up with a final budget proposal, which will go to the governor. And then the governor has so many days to approve, and she can veto certain components of it. And then anything she does veto will go back to the legislature, and I think they have to have 2/3 to override any veto. All this shakes out typically in the month of July. They try to get it done by the end of June, but for the past several years, it doesn't really happen until sometime in July. So,
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, that was very, very informative. Thank you for that. And as I say, if we could have have as a standing item for future CFACs, any rumblings you're hearing from the direction of DC regarding budget impacts or impacts on Barnstable, I think it'd be helpful for this committee to hear about it.
okay.
Any other questions from members of the committee about federal funding? Mark, I do have a question on, and this gets back to the CWMP funding model. You probably read that Secretary Burgum from the Department of Interior, I think it was early last week, issued a directive calling upon one of the offshore wind developers. I think it was Equinor, which is developing a 160 turbine project with the electricity slated to go to New York City primarily. It had been fully permitted by BOEM, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, which is part of Interior, and by EPA. And Burgum directed that Equinor, which has already invested $2 billion in this project and had begun construction, he directed that work be halted. And the rationale was that some of the approvals by BOEM and by EPA were under the prior administration had been improperly granted. And it's the details are probably going to be the subject of a court case. But I was wondering, if that's true for the Equinor project, could there potentially be a similar impact on the Vineyard Wind project, which of course is a lot further along in construction? And where I'm headed with the question is, in our CWMP model, I don't see a breakout for the revenues from HCA fees or personal property taxes from Vineyard Wind, but should we consider inserting a variable in case, on the very off chance that the Vineyard Wind project gets canceled or held up, what the impact would be on the funding model?
So the host community payments under the Vineyard Winds agreement go into a dedicated stabilization fund adopted by the town council for water supply.
Water supply, okay.
Water supply. So, the water, our drinking water, in the event that host community payments were to stop, it would be an impact on the rates for our drinking water users who are participating in that utility. because we're using those payments to mitigate fee increases for our water enterprise fund.
For across the fee increases across all of the water districts?
No, for Barnstable's water enterprise fund, just
Okay.
Barnstable's, the one we operate.
Right, which is principally Hyannis, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, okay.
And the property taxes, we do not have anything built in there, because the way Proposition 2.5 works is that, let's say Vineyard Wind's assets were completely destroyed or removed, and the project was not generating anything. They were told to stop. There's no electricity being generated from the project. Theoretically, those assets maybe would have zero value anymore. And so let's just say that they weren't taxable anymore. Well, the tax dollars that they used to pay would get redistributed to every other taxpayer in town. And that's the way
Right.
Proposition 2.5 works.
Right.
So it wouldn't reduce any of our property tax levy in the future if that were to happen. So there's nothing built into the model for that.
Oh, okay. But for the Park City Wind project, the $16 million HCA one-time payment, as we all know, that's dedicated to the
Nope.
CWMP. No?
No, nothing official yet, but it's built into the model so that you can see what if it was dedicated to the CWMP project. So, that project goes forward and we enter into a host community, or we do have the host community agreement. So if that project goes forward and we start collecting host community agreement payments, we will need to go before the town council with a suggested dedication of that revenue stream. Otherwise, it just becomes general fund revenue.
But that hasn't been agreed yet.
No.
And likewise, the property taxes just goes into general fund. The
Property taxes are all general fund. Yep.
Personal property taxes from the Park City Wind infrastructure,
Yep.
if and when it's installed, that goes into general fund.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Well, I don't know why. I guess I'm a little confused why we put the 16 million in the model if the 16 million doesn't, if the withdrawal of the 16 million doesn't impact directly the CWMP funding scenario.
Because it provides you an option. What if the council were to dedicate that $16 million payment to funding the CWMP? It gives you the option to see how it would impact the model. What if they were to do half of it? Maybe they say, let's put 8 million into the CWMP program, put the 8 million into the general fund and build our general fund reserves. You could run that scenario too. You can just change that to 8 million. So I built in the flexibility.
Okay, well, I was under the impression that it was in the model because the 16 million was already allocated to CWMP. So the 16 million could be paid, and it's a lump sum payment, as we all know now, courtesy of the revised host community agreement. But if we put zero, we could still get the 16 million, but zero of it could be dedicated to the CWMP.
Correct.
Okay.
I thought one of the things I thought my understanding was that they were going to use those funds, Mark, to do projects related to the digging, like roadways, sidewalks, etc. And that's not the case. I remember early on presentations, they were talking about, well, the reason why we want to partner up and make sure we're doing the sewer and the electrical work at the same time is that we could take advantage of that funds for resurfacing roads.
Yeah, in that host community agreement, there is more to it than the 16 million. There's agreements to pay for additional things, and I believe that side agreement, what's in the side agreement, so-called, is available on the town's website under the
Yeah.
town council area. So take a look at that, and that'll provide a whole list of things that they're going to pay for in addition to the 16 million host
Gotcha.
community payment.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that's enlightening for me. Thank you for that answer. Does anyone have any other questions about this or other topics? All right. All right. I don't, as chair, I don't have any other questions or correspondence. Does any of the committee members have matters that they want to raise? And Mark, you've raised all the staff issues you wish to bring up, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, this has been an informative meeting for me. Thank you very much, everybody. The operating budget subcommittee, we look forward to receiving your draft sometime later on next week, and we'll look forward to discussing it the day after Memorial Day. So with that, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seconded.
Excellent. Jeremy, can you call the roll, please?
Certainly. Jim Sproul,
Yes.
Chris King,
Yes, sir.
Lillian Wu,
Yes?
Hector Gunther,
Yes.
Tom Keen,
Yes.
and I am a yes.
Great. Thank you, everyone.